The heavily armed robbers, including Doug McRae, were all set to rob the bank, but the moment they lifted their heads, they found the police already locking eyes with them. For a tense moment, the air seemed to freeze, and neither side dared to make the first move. The police chose to retreat quietly. Doug quickly caught on, and the gang swiftly entered the bank, taking control of the employees who had just started their workday. They locked the doors behind them, gathered all the employees' phones, and destroyed them, making sure no one could call for help. Without wasting time, they grabbed Claire Kesey, the bank manager, and forced her to open the vault, even after multiple attempts. One of the more aggressive robbers, James Coughlin, started to think she was deliberately stalling, and he threatened to start killing hostages if she didn't hurry up. Fortunately, he gently took her hand and reassured her with a few comforting words. After Doug's calming influence, Claire finally managed to open the vault, and the robbers quickly divided into their pre-assigned roles. One group immediately began loading cash into bags, another went to destroy the surveillance tapes by microwaving them, and the rest kept an eye on the hostages in the lobby. But before they could finish packing the money, there was a sudden, urgent knock at the door. The robbers were on high alert, and amidst the chaos, Claire managed to secretly press the alarm button hidden on her bracelet. Some of his partners were less forgiving. Still, they needed to blame someone. After brutally beating one of the hostages to make a point, the robbers started pouring bleach everywhere, meticulously cleaning the entire bank to eliminate any DNA traces. They forced Claire into their getaway vehicle. After blindfolding her, Doug and the rest of the crew finally removed their masks, revealing their faces. Doug, the leader, had a rough exterior but wasn't as heartless as she had imagined. Doug made the decision to release her and dropped her off in a safe area. This decision enraged James, one of Doug's closest associates. He had found out from her identification that Claire lived in the same neighborhood as them, and he feared she might recognize them and expose their identities. Without hesitation, James started planning to kill her, but Doug, always the more level-headed of the two, managed to talk James out of it, suggesting they first try to figure out whether Claire would turn them in. Doug arranged a chance encounter with Claire the next day. She shared a startling confession with him. During the heist, she had seen a distinctive tattoo on one of the robbers. But things didn't go as expected. Instead of gathering information, Doug found himself falling for her. Out of fear of complications, however, she hadn't reported it to the police. Hearing this, Doug's heart raced with anxiety. But just as things seemed to calm down, Claire quickly placed her hand on James's neck to cover the tattoo and defuse the situation, urging him to leave quickly. Back at home, James was livid, but Doug, now blinded by his feelings for Claire, insisted that everything would be fine. Frustrated, James had no choice but to bide his time, as they still had one final heist planned. Their next target was a stadium, known for handling millions of dollars in cash every week. The next day, Doug and his crew executed the plan. Disguised as police officers, they cut off the stadium's surveillance systems and confidently made their way to the vault. The security guards were immediately suspicious of the robbers' uniforms. A tense standoff ensued, with both sides drawing their guns. But the guards, clearly outmatched by Doug and his crew, had no choice but to surrender. Doug then provided the home addresses of the vault workers, threatening them until they cooperated and opened the vault. Once inside, they began loading millions of dollars into bags and wheeled them out of the vault on carts. As they were about to load the cash into their getaway car, Doug suddenly felt something was wrong. The parking garage was eerily quiet, as if it were under surveillance by hundreds of unseen eyes. Doug moved towards the window to take a look outside and was alarmed to see that the entire area was surrounded by police and SWAT teams. At that moment, he noticed the glare of a sniper's scope reflecting in the distance. Doug quickly grabbed his machine gun. Knowing they were out of time, a fierce gunfight broke out between the robbers and the police. After just a few minutes, the SWAT team deployed several flashbangs. One of the robbers stood up reflexively, only to be immediately shot in the head by a SWAT sniper. Seeing his friend killed, Doug flew into a rage and opened fire on the police. James, driven by desperation, started firing indiscriminately at the SWAT team. But with hundreds of heavily armed officers closing in, escape seemed impossible. Realizing this, one of their crew members decided to sacrifice himself to give Doug and James a chance to escape. He drove out of the garage, drawing all the fire away from Doug and James, providing them with a brief opportunity to flee. Taking advantage of the chaos, Doug and James quickly changed into police uniforms. With so many officers on the scene, none of them familiar with each other, Doug and James managed to walk right past the SWAT team, exiting the garage undetected. However, the police chief soon realized something was amiss. He recalled that there had been more than 2 robbers in the garage, and he had received word that the robbers had disguised themselves as police officers. Acting quickly, the chief jumped into his car and began patrolling the area. Soon enough, he spotted James, who was trying to make a quiet escape with a large bag of cash. Realizing he was being followed, James turned and fired at the chief, drawing the attention of all nearby officers. Trapped, James took cover behind a dumpster. Determined not to surrender, Doug, seeing the situation from afar, was heartbroken but made the decision to drive away and save himself. Once he was safe, he immediately called Claire, hoping they could escape together. Claire agreed, asking Doug to come pick her up at her house. But as Doug scanned the area with his binoculars, he noticed that the police had already set up an ambush around her house. Claire said a secret code phrase that only the 2 of them understood. It was a warning that the police were there. The police ended up waiting in vain for an entire day, only to realize they had been tricked. A few days later, while Claire was cleaning her yard, she stumbled upon a package buried by Doug. Inside, she found stacks of cash and a single orange. The orange was a clue, a sign of where Doug was waiting for her.